Better buckle up.
An expert crew
No worries.
The team was very experienced.
Time.
pushes a commercial airliner to the limit.
We need to overspeed.
It's a very challenging environment.
Hands off now.
Do they go too far?
They wanted to do some 360s.
It's pitching up all the time.
Does that seem right to you guys?
And put their plane on a deadly flight path?
Damn it!
Investigators face a terrifying mystery.
Why didn't the stall protection kick in?
Why did one of the world's most advanced aircraft fall from the sky? And how can they stop it from happening again? Perpignan Airport in southern France. Air New Zealand engineers are getting ready for an unusual flight.
Gentlemen, good afternoon. Find any problems under the hood?
They've spent the last 3 weeks giving the A320 a complete maintenance check.
Everything looks good. You won't have any problems.
Now, Captain Norbert Keppel is going to put its automated systems to the test in the air.
Looks like it's my turn.
XL Airways Germany has been leasing the A320 from Air New Zealand. But a fresh coat of paint now displays its owner's colors. There's just one more step before XL can give the plane back.
Better buckle up. Cabin is clear. No.
Before XL Airways returns the plane to Air New Zealand, it must demonstrate that the plane is in perfect working order.
It's very similar to returning a car off lease, where the dealership will take the car, they'll let maintenance look at it, make sure that it hasn't been in an accident, that it hasn't been abused in some way, and that the systems actually work as designed.
888 Tango, how many minutes do you need?
Captain Keppel from XL Airways Germany will be flying the plane.
2 minutes.
His colleague, First Officer Theodore Ketzer, will help monitor the instruments.
2 minutes, we'll be ready.
Also on board, Captain Brian Horrell of Air New Zealand. He'll be guiding the German pilots through a series of 35 in-flight tests that make up what's known as an acceptance flight.
An acceptance flight is a flight where a crew, a specially trained crew, will take the airplane out and exercise all the systems, including the alternate systems.
Okay, 888 Tango, departure is 3 November.
3 November. Do you have that?
Yeah, it's 3 November.
Test director and the pilots go through the test plan and agree step by step what they're going to do. It is a very intense period of time because you have a lot to do in a short period of time.
888 Tango, cleared for takeoff, runway 33.
Clear for takeoff, runway
3.
Okay, gents. Here we go.
There are no regular passengers on this kind of flight. But 3 engineers and an aviation official from New Zealand are along for the ride. When the test is complete, they'll stay on board for the flight home to New Zealand.
They are about to inherit the maintenance responsibility for this aircraft. So having engineers very close to the airplane for an extended period of time is good business. It's good safety. It's the way it should be done.
For Air New Zealand, a successful acceptance flight is the key to getting this A320 back into commercial service as soon as possible.
V1, rotate.
The Airbus A320 is one of the most automated passenger planes in the world. Its advanced computer systems handle most of the flying, reducing the possibility of pilot error.
It is different than a lot of conventional airplanes in that you fly it through a computer, but the handling characteristics of the airplane are very, very good.
The first test
Gear up.
checks the system that stows the landing gear.
Time.
They need to make sure the gear locks into place within a specific length of time.
"14 seconds is good."
AAA Tango, bonjour.
Climb level 180.
A new controller in Bordeaux takes over as Flight 888 leaves Perpignan airspace.
Climbing, flight level
180.
The flight plan calls for a 2.5-hour trip that reaches the west coast of France before looping back to Perpignan. The route should provide an opportunity to test nearly every system.
Do you need anything from us while we climb?
Just says to climb flight level 310 and bank angle to 33. Check that it holds the bank angle, and beyond 33 that it rolls back.
Horrell asks the pilots to bank the plane into a steep turn.
Okay,
The captain needs permission to turn so dramatically off course.
I'll talk to them. AAA Tango, just be advised, could we do 1 or 2 360s?
We're an acceptance flight, so it would be nice if you could give us some airspace to do a few procedures.
The controller doesn't think it's safe.
We cannot allow test flights in general air traffic.
We are not doing this kind of flight, sir.
Okay, so the flight was actually requested like that.
European airspace has got a lot of airplanes moving in a variety of directions. If there is conflicting traffic around them, then the air traffic controller has no choice but to deny the request.
Captain Keppel doesn't argue.
So, no worries. We just go back to Perpignan.
There is probably a very minor annoyance level, but professional airmen are adaptive people by nature, and so we'll adapt to it and we'll pick this up later.
AAA Tango, descend flight level
310 and turn right.
turning right, inbound.
AAA Tango.
The Airbus will now loop back east of Bordeaux and return to Perpignan. 20 minutes later, Perpignan Air Traffic Control has Flight 888 back on radar. But as the plane descends, the captain begins to lose control.
It's pitching up all the time. It's pitching up.
The plane tips up steeply.
Does that seem right to you guys?
Stick forward.
The captain throttles up and pushes his stick forward to bring the nose down, but it doesn't work.
The captain's side stick goes forward. It's clearly an effort to try to lower the nose, and I believe he does not understand why the airplane doesn't respond as he's applying pretty well full power.
Flaps up. Flaps up!
Pulling in the flaps reduces drag and should help them regain control, but it's no use. The plane is diving towards the sea.
Oh, God. Oh, God! Damn it!
AAA Tango, contact tower. AAA Tango, contact tower. I've got an emergency.
Search and rescue teams race to Flight 888's last known location, but there's no sign of any survivors.
This is clearly difficult and devastating news for the families of all concerned worldwide.
The search goes on into the night. Investigators question witnesses along the coast about the last moments of the flight.
I saw the plane flying over me. All of a sudden, it went into a dive.
This is the map we're working with.
French air crash investigators from the BEA are responsible for figuring out what went wrong.
We went down right here.
Sébastien David leads the investigation.
The first phase of the sea search operations was finding precisely where the wreckage was.
David and his team are under enormous pressure.
I want you to mobilize all the resources.
The A320 is one of the industry's most popular passenger planes.
A large number of this kind of aircraft has been sold all over the world.
It's also the first airliner to use advanced computerized controls.
With the A320, automation flies the airplane the majority of the time.
If there's a problem with the plane's high-tech flight computers, many more lives could be at risk. Investigators need to find the cause of the crash quickly, before it happens again. No one has survived the crash of XL Airways Flight 888. Grieving families arrive in France to recover the bodies of their loved ones.
I didn't expect to be on my own at 34 like this.
Air New Zealand executives are also on the scene.
My commitment to the families was I want to stay here until we can bring our boys home, or we're in a position to determine that that's not possible.
What on earth is an acceptance flight?
The unusual nature of the flight presents an extra challenge for investigators.
We did not have any reference for that kind of flight. There was no defined framework.
No one may ever know what the crew was doing unless they can find the plane's flight recorders.
We have to send the divers under the sea to find the plane.
But bad weather is making it nearly impossible for divers to locate the wreckage.
With a worsening forecast, the search and rescue teams have re-emphasised personally to me that there is real urgency behind their efforts to locate the two flight recorders.
Jan Torres leads the recovery effort.
Most of the time there was severe wind and swells on the surface, which made visibility on the bottom deplorable. That is only 50 centimeters to a meter.
Searchers turn to sonar to hunt for debris from the plane on the sea floor.
This was possible thanks to a minesweeper from the Navy. By using sonar, we were able to identify the larger pieces of wreckage.
But finding the wreckage is only half the battle. Bringing it to the surface will take more time.
It was climbing like this when you saw it?
Investigators ask witnesses to describe the motion of the plane.
Some of them related an unusual flight path.
Witnesses say it was climbing here, and they were descending here. Right here, it looks like they lost control of the plane.
Those testimonies were very important for the beginning of the investigation.
Investigators wonder if the pilots lost control attempting a risky flight test. They ask controllers what they know.
Well, they wanted to do some 360s.
We're an acceptance flight.
So it would be nice if you could give us some airspace to do a few procedures.
I told them no way.
They learned the pilots asked permission to perform some tests, but that the controller turned them down.
We are not doing this kind of flight, sir.
So, no worries. We'll just head back to Perpignan.
If the test flight was called off, there must be another explanation for the plane's unusual flight path. 3 days after the crash, a major breakthrough. The recovery team finds the black boxes. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder may hold the clues investigators need.
Nice and easy.
Joan Condet is a BEA investigator.
The recorders were recovered very quickly, which made us think that we would be able to recover the data on the recorders just as quickly.
The boxes are drenched in seawater. The memory cards need to be dried out before the data can be recovered.
We open it. We remove the various layers of protection that the memory card is wrapped in. And once the card has been extracted, we dry it, and then we read it out.
But this time, it doesn't work.
Damn it. There must still be some moisture in there.
We weren't able to recover the data. And we have a laboratory designed just for that job. So it was very frustrating.
Investigators suspect moisture could be trapped deep in the electronics. Desperate to know what the pilots of Flight 888 were doing, they take the boxes to their US manufacturer.
Honeywell has special equipment for reading the cards individually. It seemed to us the quickest way to recover the data.
While they wait for word on the data, investigators turn to the wreckage recovered from the sea floor. They focus on pieces from the engines. If the engines failed, it could explain why the plane fell into a fatal dive. Bent blades from the engine turbines provide an important clue.
We could see significant damage inside the turbines, and this suggests the engines were at significant speed of rotation at impact.
The type of damage tells investigators that the engines were working properly when the plane hit the water.
No sign of any problems here. Okay, the engineers worked on these for 3 weeks.
Investigators study the A320's maintenance records.
See if we can find something, okay?
They know that engineers spent 3 weeks preparing the plane for its return to the Air New Zealand fleet. If the aircraft had a mechanical problem or defect, there should be a record of it in the file. But there's nothing that even hints at a problem with the plane.
Anyone, anything, nothing.
They were comfortable that the airplane was not only safe to fly, but in condition that matched their contractual obligations.
Investigators still have no idea what brought down Flight 888, so getting the black box data is more important than ever.
It was a big frustration. We were sure that the flight recorders data would help us to understand what happened, but we had to wait.
Six weeks after the crash, the water-soaked flight recorders are repaired, and investigators can finally listen to the conversations captured in the cockpit.
We're an acceptance flight, so it would be nice if you could give us some airspace
to do a few procedures.
What they hear confirms that the controller didn't give the crew permission to fly any tests.
We cannot allow test flights in
general air traffic. We cannot do this kind of flight, sir.
Then they hear something disturbing.
We haven't done a VHF-3 yet, have we?
Got to do a call on that.
Despite the controller's refusal, the crew continues testing the plane.
Okay, we can do the VHF-3.
Yeah. Stop. Play that back.
Investigators listen and take note of the tests the crew performed.
Okay, we can do the VHF-3.
Navigation systems, 2.
The fact that the ACC controller did not allow the crew to perform the 360 led to a situation where the crew had to improvise to be able to follow the flight program.
888 Tango, descend flight level 310 and turn right.
Turning right inbound, 888 Tango.
The crew finds a way to fit some tests in while they fly back to Perpignan.
Okay, that's good. During the turn, let's roll to 33, then to 45.
A right turn gives the captain a chance to test the system that prevents the plane from banking too steeply.
Hands off now.
Then he waits for the flight computer to level the plane.
Yep, yes, voila, it's all good.
Bank angle test, 7. The tests are out of order. They're improvising now.
They recognized at that moment they were not going to finish the entire test plan. So what can we do to maximize the time we have left?
We need to overspeed.
They followed the flight program, taking into account opportunities that were presented to them.
You just want to hear the overspeed warning?
Many of the tests activate the plane's safety systems and set off alarms in the cockpit.
There it is. You can cancel the warning if you like.
Overspeed, 8.
The crew manages to complete 12 tests in just half an hour.
So it's a busy crew.
An acceptance flight is very enjoyable from a pilot standpoint, but it is a very challenging environment because you're doing a lot of things with the airplane.
As the plane descends below the clouds, the crew sees an opportunity to do another test.
So you want what?
Yeah, we need to go slow with recovery.
This test requires that the airplane be slowed well below normal speed to let the automated protections activate and then record what they do.
When the Airbus slows down too much, the flight control computer should automatically boost speed to prevent the plane from losing lift.
Down below the clouds.
You would not want to do slow flight conditions at very low altitudes. Those would be items that you'd want to do at 10,000 feet, because if something does go wrong, you want to have room to maneuver and sort it out.
Get your power at idle. Adjust pitch. Flaps full.
The captain reduces speed and waits for the automatic protections to kick in. But this time, nothing happens. Suddenly, this test is going horribly wrong.
It's pitching up all the time.
Why didn't the stall protection kick in?
Why isn't the airplane responding? What do we need to do? Is there something else wrong? It's a diagnostic process that you don't have a lot of time with. So the big question that keeps coming back up is, why isn't the airplane responding as it has always done for me before?
Airbus's automated protection system has proved invaluable on other flights. In 2009, just after takeoff from New York, a flock of geese disables both engines on a US Airways A320. As pilot Sully Sullenberger prepares to ditch the plane in the Hudson River, the computer automatically adjusts the plane's angle into the wind, the angle of attack. It keeps him from stalling, saving the lives of everyone on board. Investigators wonder if the crash of Flight 888 has revealed a hidden flaw in one of aviation's most famous electronic safety nets. A flaw that is putting thousands of passengers at risk every day.
We had to understand the conditions which could have led to this situation.
As the investigation into the crash of Flight 888 continues, the BEA learns of another aviation tragedy. An Air France Airbus A330 has crashed off the coast of Brazil, killing all 228 people on board. Sebastian David is losing some of his best investigators as they are reassigned to deal with the Air France crash.
The team we had at the beginning of the investigation had to split into both investigations, so that makes it more difficult to conduct the investigation.
Monsieur Monsieur David, I have the angle of attack sensor data.
Impeccable.
Investigators hope the flight data recorder from XL Airways Flight 888 will finally explain what went wrong in the skies over Perpignan, France. Information from a key set of sensors stands out.
That's odd.
Partway through the flight, 2 critical sensors failed at exactly the same time.
We knew they were descending here, but the sensors still show a climb.
Angle of attack sensors act like small weather vanes on the outside of the plane. During flight, they pivot. Their movement helps the flight computer monitor the position of the plane, so it can automatically adjust the flight systems to maintain lift.
It is something that airplanes calculate continuously, and it is most critical as far as advising the pilots of an impending stall.
If the sensors got stuck in one position when they malfunctioned, it would explain why the computer didn't detect the dangerous angle of the plane.
We need to get a look at those sensors.
But the sensors are still missing at the bottom of the sea.
The entire gendarmerie was mobilized for the search. We made it understood that it was absolutely critical for our investigation.
The wreckage is so deep that divers must work in shifts to avoid decompression sickness or the bends.
Diving at 40 meters starts to become what we call a deep dive, and so a diver can only be exposed for a short time because we're dealing with compressed air.
Investigators catch a lucky break. After 2 days of searching, divers managed to recover both sensors.
One was still attached to a part of the fuselage. A second was sitting by itself on the bottom.
Investigators test the mechanism that allows the sensors to move.
Anything?
It's working perfectly.
It was very difficult to imagine a common technical problem that led to the blockage of 2 angle of attack sensors at the same time, at the same value.
There seems to be no way to explain why the sensors failed.
Or something jammed them? I want to see the FDR data again.
David returns to the flight data and searches for anything that might explain why both sensors failed at exactly the same time.
I have never heard of angle of attack simultaneous failures.
David graphs altitudes and corresponding air temperatures throughout the flight.
Minus 50 at 32,000 feet.
At high altitudes, the air outside the plane is extremely cold. This gives him an idea.
Can the sensors freeze?
If there was ice in the sensor mechanism, it might have frozen them in place. The theory would explain why they both jammed at the same time.
It's pitching up all the time.
Sending the plane's computer faulty data about the angle of attack for the rest of the flight.
It's pitching up.
With the 2 angle of attack vanes frozen, the flight control computers were not going to get the input that said, you are reaching critical angle of attack.
Investigators wonder if rainwater from a severe storm flooded the sensors and then froze.
We investigate meteorological conditions during cruise in order to find if those conditions could have led to the jamming of the angle of attack sensors.
It's a dead end.
The weather was nice that day.
The plane didn't encounter any bad weather. If water got inside the sensors, it happened on the ground, not in the air. But the advanced sensor is designed to keep rainwater out.
So, water would have to get all the way in here.
To get inside and freeze, the water would first have to travel through a long, winding channel. It seems like water had nothing to do with the failure. The edge of one of the sensors provides another intriguing lead. It's coated with several layers of paint.
This should all be sanded off. What else did those painters do?
Investigators visit the hangar where the plane spent 3 weeks being serviced. They learn the work included painting the plane, replacing XL Airways colors with those of the Air New Zealand fleet.
This led to investigate the painting operations because the angle of attack sensors needs some specific protections.
The procedure directs painters to cover the sensors first so they don't get clogged with paint.
When airplanes are painted, it's the same with your car. Very special protections have to be made for certain items. With your car, you cover the headlights because you don't want paint over the headlights. That's a very simple analogy, but to a much more complex way, the same thing is true with airplanes.
Investigators consider the possibility that the sensors malfunctioned because of a sloppy coat of paint.
At this point, the investigation focused on finding out if there was any possibility that paint might have adhered there and created a blockage that prevented the rotation of the vane.
They re-examined the angle of attack sensor data from the flight recorder. If paint was jamming the sensors, it would have caused problems throughout the entire flight.
Climbing flight level 180.
But the data clearly shows the sensors didn't fail until 22 minutes after takeoff.
Do you need anything from us while we climb?
The recorders showed that the sensor was working at the beginning of the flight.
We need to get a look at those sensors.
Investigators conclude paint wasn't the problem. There must be another explanation for the failure. They noticed something else in the maintenance records. The plane needed extra cleaning after the paint job was done.
Some dust was covering the top of the aircraft. The maintenance people had to remove this dust.
Tell me exactly how you cleaned this plane.
Normally, maintenance workers use a clean cloth to remove any dust. But this time, they rinse the plane with a hose.
The painting operations had taken a little bit of a delay. To rinse the aircraft was faster than to use clean clothes to remove the dust.
Spraying uncovered sensors with a high-pressure hose might explain how water got so deep inside. But the investigators need proof. They mount a sensor in a test rig and recreate the cleaning procedure.
Okay, hit it.
We knew the plane had been rinsed with a fire hose plugged into the water main, so we got hold of the details regarding water pressure and flow.
Okay, got it. Okay, let's get it to the lab.
Next, they place the sensor in a freezer and duplicate the cold air temperatures found at 32,000 feet.
It was a massive ingestion of water that solidified into ice.
I think we definitely got some ice in there. It won't budge.
The lab results seem to confirm the investigators' hunch. Ice inside the sensors could have frozen them in place. But there's one final test they need to do to be absolutely sure.
We perform a test flight to check what could be the temperature inside the angle of attack sensors. That was the first time such a test was conducted because nobody knew what could be the temperature inside an angle of attack sensor.
They flood the sensors of an A320 with water and recreate Flight 888. At low altitudes, the sensors work perfectly.
So far, so good.
When the plane reaches 32,000 feet, the temperature inside the sensor drops below freezing.
There they go. The sensors aren't moving.
The water inside freezes and the sensors stop working.
Okay, you can bring them home.
The result explains why the flight computer didn't prevent the plane from stalling during the low speed test.
Get your power at idle. Adjust pitch. Flaps full.
With the sensors frozen, the computer can't calculate the plane's true angle of attack.
The flight control computers can only respond to data and inputs that they get. In this case, the two angle of attack inputs were simultaneously bad, and the flight control computer has no way to know that.
It's pitching up all the time. It's pitching up.
Because the angle of attack vanes couldn't move, they could not then activate the low-speed protections that the crew is expecting.
The plane's automated safety systems are effectively crippled. But there's another mystery.
Stick forward.
Just before the crash, the captain tries to fly out of trouble.
The last level of protection, if you will, is the crew.
Captain Keppel increases power while pushing his side stick forward to bring the nose down. It's a textbook maneuver to prevent the plane from stalling. But it doesn't work. The plane continues to pitch up until it loses lift and falls from the sky.
They tried to apply the nose down input on the side stick, but their efforts were not sufficient.
Investigators need to know why. A computer simulation helps investigators analyze Flight 888's final flight check, the low speed test.
Okay, get your power at idle. Adjust pitch. Flaps full.
Okay, here we go.
Captain Keppel deliberately slows his plane down for the test, but the computer lets the speed drop too far, below the minimum needed to keep the plane in flight.
They let their airspeed drop to 100 knots.
We noticed just how dramatically their airspeed was falling.
Pose it.
Investigators notice a warning on the cockpit flight display moments before the crash.
What is that?
They learned that the warning is supposed to alert the pilots the flight computer is no longer helping to fly the plane. It has switched to full manual mode.
You get a message in red that appears in the middle of your primary flight display telling you to use the manual elevator trim. The message in English is, use man pitch trim.
The warning comes on when the plane's computer gets conflicting information. The frozen sensors are telling the computer the plane is flying level, while other onboard sensors are relaying its extreme nose-up attitude.
The airplane by design, when it starts getting data that it cannot figure out what to do with, reverted and said, all right, something is wrong, we don't know what, this is up to the pilots to sort out.
The plane gave the pilot control right here.
It seems the crew of Flight 888 either didn't see or didn't understand the warning being sent by the computer.
Stick forward.
The pilot uses his side stick to try to lower the nose. In manual mode, that's just not enough. The crew also needs to adjust the trim wheel for a more dramatic change of pitch.
The auto trim system is disabled, and the pilots are required to do that manually.
But they never do.
Now the pilots find themselves in a very, very difficult situation. The airplane's not accelerating, the nose is coming up, it's very hard to get it to come down, and they're at low altitude.
The two crew members tried everything to recover and to check the control of the aircraft, but they did not fully understand the situation.
Investigators check the pilot's qualifications. Perhaps poor training accounts for their failure to respond properly to cockpit warnings.
The captain, who was the pilot flying, was the head of the operations divisions in the airline. The co-pilot was also very experienced as a co-pilot, and the captain that was sitting on the observer seat was also a very experienced captain.
Everything looks fine.
Their records are spotless.
And so the team was very experienced.
Investigators need to know why such an experienced crew failed to act quickly when their plane was in danger. They suspect one reason may be the unusual nature of this flight. An acceptance flight designed to test the plane's limits.
Okay, that's good. During the turn, let's roll to 33, then to 45.
Okay.
Every time they test the plane,
Hands off now.
the automation fixes the problem.
Yep. Yes. Voila. It's all good.
Even when they hear alarms, they don't worry.
We need to overspeed.
You just want to hear the overspeed warning?
They're expecting the plane to correct the problem.
There it is. You can cancel the warning if you like.
They trusted their plane too much.
The crew allowed the speed to get so low because they were very confident in the good functioning of the aircraft.
Unfortunately, in this case, they allowed it to go all the way to the point that the airplane actually began to stall.
Stick forward.
Then they were in a stall recovery situation without a lot of altitude to work with.
Flaps up! Flaps up!
With their plane in a catastrophic stall, the 7 men aboard Flight 888 were doomed.
Oh, God! Oh, God! Damn it!
Our march toward automation has nowhere come close to stopping. And it's appropriate. In previous generation airplanes, you first learn to fly the airplane and then you learn to manage the automation. In later generation airplanes, you learn the automation as an integral part. But we have to have the interface between the pilots and the automation improve and mature.
The official accident report highlights several contributing factors, including the aircraft washing procedures and the decision to perform flight checks at low altitude.
Yeah, we need to go slow with recovery.
The report also calls for clearer rules governing acceptance flights and more training for stall recovery.
This led the BEA to recommend training for the pilots to be able to recover from stall conditions.
Improved training for loss of control events is something that all pilots need. Loss of control is the leading cause of fatalities in all aspects of aviation. So it is an area that we need to focus on as an industry to keep our safety record improving.
Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Acceptance test flying is going to be with us. Maintenance check flights are a necessary part of aviation.
Better buckle up.
And so we need to take these lessons and learn them well because we're going to be doing these flights again.
We take science out of the classroom and onto the streets with explosive results in None of the Above, the brand new series starting on Wednesday at 9.